Please be seated. Proceedings are resumed.
Personal explanations.
None.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
None.
Raising a matter of privileges.
None.
Government business. Bills. First readings. Traffic Amendment Bill 2022.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
Mental Health Amendment Bill 2022.
The bill has been read a first time and is set down for the second reading.
Mental Health Commission Amendment Bill 2022.
The bill has been read a first time and is now set down for the second reading.
Financial Assistance Bill 2022.
The bill has been read a first time, is set down now for the second reading.
Accounts Amendment Bill 2022.
The bill has been deemed to have been read a first time, now set down for the second reading. Which one? The Accountants Amendment Bill 2022.
Accountants Amendment Bill 2022.
The bill has been set down, read the first time, set down now for the second reading.
Limited Liability Companies Amendment Bill 2022.
The bill has been read the first time, set down now for the second reading.
Education Amendment Bill 2022.
The bill has been deemed to have been read a first time, set down now for the second reading.
Second readings. Traffic Amendment Bill 2022.
The bill has been the Honorable the Minister of Financial Services. Sorry. The Honorable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to move the second reading of a bill shortly entitled the Traffic Amendment Bill 2022.
The bill has been duly moved. Does the Honourable Premier speak to the bill?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, this is a short bill. It consists of 3 clauses. The first clause is the short title. The second is the amendment of Section 2 of the Traffic Act 2021 revision, interpretation, and it reads that the Traffic Act 2021 revision is amended in Section 2 by deleting the definition of the words prescribed limit and substituting the following definition. The following definition. Prescribed limit means A, 31 micrograms of alcohol in 100 milliliters of breath, or B, 70 milligrams of alcohol in 100 milliliters of blood, or C, 94 milligrams of alcohol in 100 milliliters of urine, or such other proportions as may be prescribed by regulations. The third clause of the bill deals with transitional provisions, and it provides that all proceedings in respect of offenses committed or alleged to have been committed against or under Section 82, 83, or 84 of the Traffic Act 2021 revision, and which commenced prior to the commencement of this amending act, shall be continued as if this amending act had not come into force. Now, Mr. Speaker, why are we bringing this amendment? Mr. Speaker, obviously the intention is to change the prescribed limits in respect to the blood alcohol concentration limit found in a person's breath, blood, and urine whilst driving a vehicle, attempting to drive a vehicle, or supervising a learner driver. Mr. Speaker, as we're all aware, we have had an alarming and unacceptably high number of road safety accidents in this country, some of which have resulted in fatalities. The annual numbers seem to be increasing. No doubt it is partly a function of the volume of traffic on the roads. But, Mr. Speaker, it seems that we have some particularly bad habits which have developed over time in relation to, I would say, road courtesy, road etiquette, and probably, if we're being honest, driving skills as well, a degradation of some driving skills. Mr. Speaker, I have previously indicated to the members of this Honourable House that one of the ways that the government would address this issue would be by lowering the blood alcohol limits in the Traffic Act. Mr. Speaker, the PAC government is now delivering on that purpose, that promise. Mr. Speaker, with the current blood alcohol concentration limit being 100 milligrams of alcohol in 100 milliliters of blood, or 0.1%, the Cayman Islands currently has some of the most lenient drunk driving or drink driving legislation in the world. Lenient. Mr. Speaker, that is one ranking that we shouldn't be proud of. And unfortunately, these things are tracked in other parts of the world. For example, the UK Driving Instructors Association keeps track of these rankings and ratings and prescribed limits. That's the United Kingdom's largest professional body for driving and rider training, education, support, and advice. The research, Mr. Speaker, on their website has also provided a comparative analysis which tells us that the average worldwide blood alcohol concentration, or BAC limit, is actually 0.06%. Mr. Speaker, that means that the average prescribed limit is actually 60% of what our prescribed limit is currently. Therefore, we are considerably higher than the average around the world. Mr. Speaker, it becomes even more stark when we look at the average European blood alcohol concentration limit, and that is 0.05%, which obviously means that we are twice our limit of 0.1% is twice what the European average is, for blood alcohol concentration. Mr. Speaker, we have a company here that does beer, brews beer. We have other companies that have spirits made elsewhere and they're labeled here. But these countries in the old world, that's where a lot of the technology comes from to manufacture alcoholic beverages, Mr. Speaker. And I know that they don't drink any more than people in the Cayman Islands do, or less. Mr. Speaker, if they recognize that blood alcohol concentrations need to be controlled and reduced significantly in order to send a strong message that driving under the influence is not acceptable, then we must do the same. Mr. Speaker, we all know, we've all had experiences with, and some of us, unfortunately, family members who have died on our roads because somebody that was driving them was over the legal limit, or somebody that crashed into them was over the legal limit. And I don't know about any of my colleagues, but I have seen far too many instances where people that I went to school with, people that I know very well, love and care for, have their lives ended because of somebody who is drunk driving. For too long, Mr. Speaker, we have, as a society, tolerated drink driving. And it's not a Caymanian thing, Mr. Speaker. It's a everybody on the roads thing. If we have a limit which is double what the average European limit is, and 40% higher than what the average worldwide limit is, then that is sending a signal that we are more tolerant of drink driving. So, Mr. Speaker, we need to send a very clear message. And when I first mentioned this in this Honourable House, I think it was November last year, I couldn't have anticipated then, and I certainly would never have wanted to be right, even if I was speculating, that instead of being on track for an average year for the Cayman Islands, average over the last 3 or 4 years of around 8 or 9 people losing their lives on our roads, Mr. Speaker, we are now at 13, and we still have the better part of 3 months to go. Mr. Speaker, there is a tragedy going on here on our roads, and alcohol plays too significant a role with it. And we have to send a very strong message. The government, through the Ministry of I guess it's Infrastructure, has a committee to review the traffic law more broadly, and that committee has been established. But, Mr. Speaker, this particular item has been identified. The blood alcohol concentration issue has been identified and established as a significant causative factor, and it is one of the recommendations that has come out from a presentation by the National Roads Authority to our National Security Council. I think that presentation was done towards the end of last year. And they are obviously, and this is the National Roads Authority, are obviously very concerned about safety on our roads. But this is one of the specific items that they identified as a problem. Because you can build roads as straight as you want. You can build them with as much safety features as you want. You can build them with the least amount of curves. You can build them with banks to help cars stay on the road. But you cannot build them to maintain safety where somebody chooses to impede themselves with alcohol or drugs. Mr. Speaker, when examining, well, let me go back slightly. The European countries, in terms of comparison, Scandinavian countries such as Norway and Sweden, who have some of the highest ratings of overall happiness, gross national happiness. If they don't use that metric, they certainly use other metrics to identify when people are happiest. Those countries have blood alcohol concentration limits at 0.02%. So 1/5 of what the Cayman Islands is. Mr. Speaker, when examining the World Health Organization's data on legal blood alcohol limits that was last updated in 2018, we can also see that Cayman has the most lenient blood alcohol limit in any of the CARICOM countries where there are specific prescribed limits. Where there are none, many of them, there's only a small number, and they are establishing limits themselves. They're in the process of doing so. Mr. Speaker, Suriname, as one of the CARICOM states, has the lowest blood alcohol concentration limit of 0.05%. So they are obviously more aligned with the European standards. The United States, the United Kingdom, Jamaica, Bahamas, they all have limits of 0.08%. So, Mr. Speaker, our proposed limit is 0.07%. So we are putting ourselves between the European average and the average in some of the countries that are closest to us. But, Mr. Speaker, there's nothing wrong with that, because we must send a strong signal that the issues that we have with road traffic accidents in the country, not all of them result in death, Mr. Speaker, but the number of accidents is far too high for this little island. For 2021, for example, Mr. Speaker, officers attended 2,633 motor vehicle accidents. Let that number sink in. 2,633 motor vehicle accidents. That was an increase of 466 compared to 2020. On average, Mr. Speaker, we have around 51 motor vehicle accidents per week in the Cayman Islands. And again, we are now at 13 road deaths from 12 motor vehicle accidents. Admittedly, not all of those relate to alcohol, but too many of them do. And Mr. Speaker, I will say to my honorable colleagues and the public, there is no price that you can put on one life. There is no price you can put on one life. The culture of drinking and driving in the Cayman Islands must change, and we must send a strong signal that this is an unacceptable public health hazard, especially during the festive season. And that season is where we are coming up to, Mr. Speaker. I don't know about anybody else, but I always say a prayer and I breathe a big sigh of relief when I wake up after Christmas Eve and I don't hear of any accidents claiming the lives of any of my friends, my family, my fellow citizens of the Cayman Islands. But Mr. Speaker, we all know that too often that does happen. It happens too often. So we have to send that strong signal. We have to make sure that we have a reset on this, Mr. Speaker. The National Drug Council has been running campaigns for decades. They've got things like the Purple Ribbon Pledge, designated driver, New Year's Eve, Purple Ribbon bus. But, Mr. Speaker, even with those facilities open to them, even with it becoming much more acceptable for somebody to say, okay, I won't drink, I'll be the designated driver, we still have people making shocking decisions to drink and drive. And we have to change that, Mr. Speaker. We must change that. Mr. Speaker, in January of this year, the Cayman Compass reported that RCIPS recorded between the 2nd of December and the 2nd of January, so 1 month, during its Operation Winter Garden Holiday Safety Exercise, a total of 228 collisions and 24 drunk drivers were apprehended by police. 228 collisions during that 1 month period, and 24 drunk drivers were apprehended by police. Now, we know they don't have a 100% success rate. We don't have enough police to track everybody that is drink driving. So we know that to some extent, at least that may be the tip of the iceberg. But Mr. Speaker, this amounts to roughly 7 collisions per day over that period, some of which were logged as hit and run accidents. Mr. Speaker, these types of behaviors and these harrowing statistics are not acceptable in our country, not a country that we are trying to make stronger, to make better, to improve the lives of our people, to improve public health statistics, to improve the potential of our people. Mr. Speaker, we can't have lives being ended because of people making decisions that are rash or unreasonable or unfair. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to take this much longer, but I would simply say to this Honorable House that I have outlined the reasons why we must make this change, and I know that everybody understands the implications. Yes, there will be people who will have to be more careful about drinking and driving. They might have to have one less drink. But, Mr. Speaker, that is precisely the kind of thing we need people to do and think about. We need people to be more, to take a different approach, to think more carefully about it, and if at all possible, avoid drink driving completely. have somebody else. Have somebody else do the driving for you. You can all have fun. I don't drink myself, but that doesn't mean that other people can't enjoy a few drinks here and there, enjoy the holidays, and get home safely by arrangement with somebody else. Mr. Speaker, the government intends to ensure that there are public service announcements that get pushed out consistently over the airwaves, over social media, any medium and media that we can, to ensure that people adhere to the new standard and make the right decisions about their own safety and about the safety of the lives of our people, and in some cases the lives of people who are visiting this country as well. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I commend this bill with this short amendment to this Honourable House, and I hope members will find it appropriate to support the amendment, sir. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Last call. Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable, the Deputy Governor.
No, sir. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, thank you. Allow me to briefly say a few words in support of this bill. Mr. Speaker, I want to sincerely thank the Premier and the government for bringing this amendment bill. As our Premier said, this bill can save lives. Mr. Speaker, I want to go over a few statistics. The Premier mentioned some, but I just want to add a few. Last week at our police briefing that we have with our members of the RCIP, we were advised, so this was late September, that year to date, the RCIPS had recorded 2,678 incidents of speeding, including 100 in a 2-week period. 2,678 incidents of speeding. Year to date, again, there were 1,918 motor vehicle accidents were reported, including 103 in the past 2 weeks. 1,918, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I look back at 2012. In 2012, for the entire period of 2012, we had 808 motor vehicle accidents. And 10 years later, before the year is out, we have had 1,918. Mr. Speaker, the Premier mentioned probably the most crucial figure of all is the 12 fatalities that we have had this year. Well, 12 fatal accidents involving 13 deaths. We recall the sad case of the father and child that died. Mr. Speaker, there were 3 in 2012. 3 deaths. We have now had 13. We've had 9 fatalities in 2021, 9 fatalities in 2020. We're at 13. Mr. Speaker, I look back at the stats for 2021. In 2021, 312 summonses was issued in relation to DUI, an increase of 84 or 37% compared to 2020. So in 2021, we had 312 people that were taken to court for DWI. Mr. Speaker, approximately 26% of all DUI offenses in 2021 involved a driver, and Mr. Speaker, this is important, involved a driver that was at least double the drink-drive limit. In 2% of the DUI cases, the driver was 3 times the drink-drive limit. Approximately 36% of all DUIs offenses in 2021 also involved a motor vehicle accident. 36% of all the DUIs offenses in 2021 also involved a motor vehicle accident. As the Premier said, in 2021, there were 2,633 motor vehicle accidents, an increase of 466, or 22% compared to 2020, an average of 51 motor vehicle accidents per week. Mr. Speaker, in 2021, while we had 6 deaths, 21 persons suffered serious injury. 292 persons suffered slight injury as a result of a motor vehicle accident. Mr. Speaker, I think we all agree these are frightening statistics. Mr. Speaker, while we cannot control accidents, accidents happen. You drive down the road with all due care and attention, and someone runs into the back of you. Nothing we can do about that. We can be careful, but it really sometimes is unavoidable due to someone else, carelessness or negligence or something else. But Mr. Speaker, the one thing that we have, or the 2 things that we have total control of as drivers is our speed and whether we drink and drive. Those are things that we, not someone else, don't blame anyone else. These are the 2 things that you as a driver have total control over. Mr. Speaker, there's no reason to drink and drive. If you drive, don't drink. Mr. Speaker, when I was 22 years old, I stopped drinking alcohol. I had my reasons. So this is one person, Mr. Speaker, that you're never, ever going to hear about drinking and driving. I told my son and daughter last Thursday night, we were celebrating my wife's birthday. For the record, I had a Diet Coke. But I said to my children, and they were talking about why I don't drink. And I said to them, listen, there are many reasons, but just think of it this way. Of all of the speeches that I have ever listened to in my life, of world leaders, other successful people in life, you hear them giving speeches about what made them successful. Some of it was their education, their experience, their role models, their teams, people that assisted them. Many people thank the good Lord for their success. No one has ever thanked alcohol. I have never heard anyone get up and say, the reason that I am successful today is because I drank alcohol. I'm told maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, Mr. Speaker, there's no reason that we should be drinking and driving. It's just there's no reason. Mr. Speaker, one of the things that again caused me to rethink my drinking was what my mother told me when I was a teenager. And Mr. Speaker, yes, I was a bit reckless when I was a teenager. I definitely drove fast sometimes. And whenever I was leaving the house, my mother used to say to me, "Franz, be careful." And I used to say, "Mom, you know, when my time comes, I'm gonna go." And she said, "Yes, that's true. But I want you to remember this. If the Lord is not ready for you, there are worse things than death." And I said, "Mom, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, suppose you kill someone. Or suppose you are paralyzed. You lay down and you look up at the ceiling all day. There's worse things than death." And she was right, Mr. Speaker. And that, all of those lessons, Mr. Speaker, drove me to the conclusion, I don't really need alcohol in my life. And Mr. Speaker, I see our young people today, actually last night, driving on West Bay Road on a motorcycle. I think they were standing on a motorcycle, driving down the middle lane of the road. Mr. Speaker, that's not cool. That's not cool. Remember, when the accident happens, it's too late. When you knock someone down or you get hurt, it's too late. We want to make sure that our people get the message, and that's what this bill does, Mr. Speaker, is that the government cares about its citizens and the people who live here, and we want to do everything we can to have a year where there are zero motor vehicle fatalities. Zero. Mr. Speaker, I look back, it took me a long time, and I really didn't find a year where we didn't have zero fatalities. But Mr. Speaker, that should be our goal as our beloved Cayman Islands, small. We should have zero fatalities. There's nowhere that we should have 1,918 motor vehicle accidents this year. Absolutely no way. Again, these are things that we control, Mr. Speaker. We can't blame other people for this. You are in control of your vehicle, and you should not get into that vehicle if you've had alcohol. Don't say, "Oh, well, I won't, one drink is enough." My view is, do not drink and drive, period. Mr. Speaker, again, I want to close by thanking the government for bringing this. I want to mention His Excellency the Governor, who was very passionate about this. He, as the Premier said, he was raised in the National Security Council, and the Governor made it very clear that he felt that the government should take action to reduce the amount of fatalities, and the government has done the very brave thing, not necessarily the popular thing, but definitely the right thing in bringing this amendment. Mr. Speaker, I repeat what I said earlier. We blame other people for a lot of things. We say people have come here and done this, and people have come here and done that. People have taken things from us. I don't buy none of those things. I think we are in total control of our destiny. But again, drinking and driving is something that you as an individual have total control over. Do not get behind the wheel of a car if you've had a drink, and that solves the problem. Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Minister, Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just very briefly, to commend the Honorable Premier for bringing this bill forward. I agree wholeheartedly with the facts and arguments he put forward, and those of the Deputy Governor. And I also just wanted to add a human touch to this, because I know for West Bay South, we have had families affected by these fatalities. And there is nothing worse than going to a funeral service where the child has gone before the parent over a senseless road fatality. This bill in size may be physically small, but will have an enormous beneficial impact. And no, it is not all. As the Honorable Premier alluded to, there is more work to be done, led by the Minister for Infrastructure, to increase greater road safety. But this legislation should symbolize what we should stand for in terms of road safety under the simple principle that you can drink, you can drive, you just can't drink and drive. It's as simple as that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just about everything that needs to be said have been said, but I certainly understandably would want to add my voice to what has been said before as it relates to, Mr. Speaker, this timely, if I might call it, recalibration. And we're hoping that it will act as a deterrent, albeit some might say, well, it's a small gesture. But the fact is that we're hoping that it will act as a deterrent to deal with some of these inexplicable behavior, Mr. Speaker, that we are experiencing on the road. And it is, in my view, the drinking and driving is a sort of a microcosm, if you will, of a larger issue of a total absence of due care and attention by some of our road users. Mr. Speaker, there's a lack of civility these days. Persons driving and cutting in front of each other, flatly refuse to allow others to get out or egress onto main road. People driving using their cell phones. Some people driving and doing their hair in the vehicle, Mr. Speaker. It's quite a common occurrence. Person is a fact. Persons driving, Mr. Speaker, refusing to use their indicators when cutting in front of you or using roundabouts. All of these little things. And then, Mr. Speaker, you can see there's this sort of a pent-up anger. This road rage is just inexplicable. And so there's a confluence of attitudes, behaviors, poor behaviors, Mr. Speaker, that contribute or is contributing to carnage. And I know the word is all relative, but in the context of the Cayman Islands, some of what we're seeing is really carnage on our streets. And so the amendment itself, Mr. Speaker, is very timely. You cannot, should not be consuming alcohol and sitting behind a steering. It's a very selfish thing to do, because you have the potential of causing not just injury and damage to yourself and your own vehicle and property, but to others. And it is something that we ought, Mr. Speaker, to discourage. And the hope is that this amendment would help. And you know, Mr. Speaker, you might have heard about it as well. There are those who, when they behave in these sort of antisocial way on the road, they take umbrage to the police speaking to them about it. I know, Mr. Speaker, we do have some police officers who might not have been covering themselves on the RCIPS in glory in terms of their tone, but the fact of the matter is that there are persons who are involved in these sort of terrible behavior on the road, and take exception to police officers talking to them about it, and you hear them, they're calling on the radio and question why is the police not going and looking for thieves and murderers and all this sort of thing. You're not supposed to speak to them about, you're not supposed to speak to them about their behaviors. And there are others who question, well, you know, when these bad driving are taking place, where are the police? Why isn't there a police officer? Well, Mr. Speaker, my response to that as well is that you can't have a police officer at every street corner. You can't have a police officer at every stop sign. And why do I need a police officer to tell you that you must drive responsibly on the road? That's something that you ought to know. So we have these issues on the road, Mr. Speaker, and we need to take stock. Each time something happens, a death occurs, we spoke about it for a day or two, and then it's back to normal. And in a lot of the times, the people who imbibe, and they're rushing to nowhere. It's a very small island, not sure where they're rushing to, and you travel on the street, and the traffic, you have 3 lanes of traffic, but for some reason, one lane is not moving for a minute or so, not moving fast enough. And persons have absolutely no patience. They cannot stay in that lane if it's not moving for a minute. They have to cut into another lane, and as soon as that other lane that they cut into stop moving, they cut back into the lane that they just left. That's just some of the annoying things that you experience on the road as a motorist. And Mr. Speaker, don't ever try to speak to anybody, because it is, I mean, they use some of the most vulgar language to describe you. And so you must just accept it as a norm. And so. Yeah, but fortunately for me, I don't have a road rage, Mr. Speaker. I don't get involved in an argument. And so I look, I smile, I turn my window, or I go about my business. I don't ever answer back, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, so I don't respond. But the point I'm making, Mr. Speaker, is that this is a small gesture. And I'm hoping that this, along with other initiatives that are being worked on, and plus our own sense of responsibility, will help to curb the bad behavior that we're experiencing on our road and on our roadways, and to help to cut down on the incidences of death and damage that we are seeing, Mr. Speaker. Too many young lives have been lost as a result of this. So I certainly want to again commend the Honorable Premier for this timely amendment, and it will certainly, Mr. Speaker, make the police life much easier. The Honorable Deputy Governor spoke about the numerous discussions we've had at police briefings and other discussions. They have been pleading, asking for these amendments, Mr. Speaker. So we need to equip our police officers that they can now go and do their job, and hopefully the motorist will show some civility and some respect and some patience on our roadways. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Last call. Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I call on the Honorable the Premier for his right of reply.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I want to give my heartfelt thanks for those members who have spoken in support of this, starting with the Honourable Deputy Governor, my colleague, the Minister for Financial Services, member for West Bay South, the Honourable Attorney General. I thank them all, sir, and I thank all other members in this House today who have not spoken, because I know they support it as well. I know they support it as well. So I'm absolutely confident in the tacit support of other members. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to say very briefly that one of the really important things about this for me is reflected in a World Health Organization statistic that traffic accidents and traffic accident injuries are the leading cause of death amongst young people in the world. And that probably is not at all dissimilar for the Cayman Islands, Mr. Speaker. And I will tell you a very quick story that I experienced as a young boy. I had a friend whose mother approached me and said, I know you're probably a little bit, you seem to behave in a way that's a little bit more mature perhaps, and you don't take the same kind of chances. Can you speak to my son and see if you can encourage him to change his perspective and not take so many chances and not be so carefree and fun-loving? And Mr. Speaker, I did that, but I never did get to go back and speak to the mother to say that we had that conversation, because it wasn't too long after that that I was awoken by my mother early in the morning to tell me that this young man had died in a car accident under the influence. And Mr. Speaker, I have carried that because I felt that I somehow failed that mother. I went to see that mother, and I remember her anguish and her grief, and I remember her saying to me, I always wondered what mothers feel like when they have to go through this. She said, now I know. Mr. Speaker, that was something that I have carried with me because I felt like I failed. I was a young man. But I felt like I failed that mother somehow. Like if I had just tried harder, she wouldn't have that grief. Mr. Speaker. I could tell you the connection with the member of this House, a member of this House today, but I won't. But Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that these are real consequences, and we have got to try our hardest to make sure, because we don't want to, we as a government want to feel like we're doing everything we can to promote the health and safety of our young people. Even though, as has been noted, this may not be the most popular thing to do, it is the right thing to do, and I felt as the Premier that I should bring it because I should carry the burden of it if it's not the most popular thing to do. Mr. Speaker, this is not just about death either, though, because while there is emotional and other immeasurable trauma, there are also things like financial implications for families. I mean, I'm sure none of us have to think very hard to think about families that have had their financial situation decimated by injuries from accidents, including DUI accidents specifically. And then if you add up all of the issues around the labor force implications, impacts on business communities, impacts on loss of productivity, Mr. Speaker, those things are important and they are relevant, but I will go back to the original point. This is about all those things, but importantly, it's about saving lives, and even more importantly, statistically, it is about saving young lives. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all members, as I've said, who have spoken in support, and I am confident that we will have the support of this House, all of those who are present, voting in support of this. Thank you, sir.
Not supposed to do this, but I will do it. I know how you feel, because I've been down that road. And when my son, who's a man with 4 children now, used to stay out, I never slept. And now I have a 20-year-old grandson who drives. And I think today that my 17-year-old grandson might have just got his full license. So I quite understand. And I've been down the road where you have been with having to give advice. Unfortunately, the young person didn't take it and ended up the same way you just spoke about. The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Traffic Amendment Bill 2022 be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The Traffic Amendment Bill 2022 has been given a second reading. We're a little bit past the hour when we would break. For the adjournment, can you, Mr. Premier, move for the suspension of the orders?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the suspension of Standing Order 10-2 in order for the business of the House to continue beyond the hour of interruption.
Question is that standing orders be suspended to allow the House to continue after the hour of 4:30. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The House will continue its business.
Mental Health Amendment Bill 2022.
The Honorable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to move the second reading of the bill titled Mental Health Amendment Bill 2022.
The bill has been duly moved. Is the Honorable Minister speaking thereto?
Yes, thank you. Before going into the bill, Mr. Speaker, I humbly seek your indulgence to just give a public statement marking that today is World Mental Health Day, and it's so fitting that I have two bills on the order paper that's addressing that very subject matter. So, for your indulgence, thank you. As many are likely aware that every 10th of October, nations across the world celebrate World Mental Health Day as a way to raise awareness on mental health issues and mobilize efforts in support of mental health. These efforts are all incredibly important, and many government departments and statutory authorities, such as the Department of Counseling Services, the Family Resource Center, and the Health Services Authority, as well as NGO partners and private sector partners around our islands, contribute daily to the awareness and education on mental health as well as support services available on our islands. Today, I would like to broaden the discussion on mental wellness. On the goals of my ministry is to strengthen public health nationally. When we speak of public health, we are referring to the specific science of protecting, promoting, and improving the lives, health, and wellness of families and communities via prevention, education, access, and personal empowerment. Mental health is a significant component of public health, as it has a tremendous impact on the way which people make decisions, handle stress, and related to others. All of these things, Mr. Speaker, also pass on from generation to generation as children and youth learn how we model and mold these behaviors. Poor mental health impacts our ability to maintain relationships. It can lead to social isolation. It impacts our performance at school and work, as was highlighted in last month's Recovery Month, 2022, there is a clear relationship between poor mental health and substance misuse. So, how do we broaden the discussion on mental wellness? The first step is to simply acknowledge that mental wellness is for everyone, and therefore should be a component of every effort to improve people's lives. Mental well-being must be cultivated in our schools as we work to create emotionally supportive environments that fosters learning opportunities for all children. Mental well-being must also be cultivated in our elderly homes and service for seniors to ensure that we address problems like isolation and maintain our elders' quality of life in their golden years. Mental well-being must be present in violence prevention initiatives. Mental well-being must be cultivated in our workplaces, whether there are offices, tour boats, taxi cabs, or restaurants. to proactively work towards better work-life balance. And of course, mental well-being must be a component of all aspects of health care, given what we know about mental health issues influencing the onset, development, and effects of physical illnesses. It is by recognizing the room that we have to cultivate mental well-being in multiple settings and embracing the opportunity to do so that we will reach our goal to have happier, healthier, and a more resilient population. Let us take the first step to make mental health and well-being for all a global priority by prioritizing it in our homes, schools, workplace, and other spheres of influence. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, going on to the bill that is before this Honorable House. In 2013, the Mental Health Law 1997 revision was updated so that it would meet the needs of the residents, provide adequate safeguard and detained patients, and reflect the advances in psychiatric treatments. Now, since the law was updated in 2013, the Mental Health Commission they identified various gaps within the legislation and the regulations that were either inconsistent with practices or just required new and updated forms for clarity. Mr. Speaker, the last comprehensive review of the legislation that commenced in 2010 included a cross-section of stakeholders from the Ministry of Education. You're talking about the Department of Children and Family Services, the then Her Majesty's Northward Prison Services, Health Services Authority, private mental health counselors, National Drug Council, Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, Department of Counseling Services, Portfolio of Legal Affairs, and the Department of Community Rehabilitation Services. Mr. Speaker, at that time, a review committee as well was established by the then minister with responsibility for health. The extensive revision and update conducted in 2013 repealed the old law with the current law, which now meets the needs of our mental health patients, and it complies with the human rights provisions in accordance to the Cayman Islands Constitution 2009. Mr. Speaker, in that update, there were several new detention orders, treatment orders, a temporary holding power, updated definition, and the establishment of a mental health commission. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to now speak in more detail to the specific proposals contained in the Mental Health Amendment Bill 2022. Clause 1, short title. This clause provides for the short title of the legislation and the commencement provision. Clause 2, interpretation. This clause, Mr. Speaker, provides for the introductions of new definitions in order to modernize the legislation. Now, the new definitions, such as emergency detention order, observation order, order for protective custody, spouse, and treatment order, have now been included. The word spouse, Mr. Speaker, has been inserted and defined in the appropriate alphabetical sequence. An order for protective custody, Mr. Speaker, has been introduced as the older order. The order has been made by the medical officer or responsible medical officer in accordance with sections 6 or 12, respectively. Now, currently, Mr. Speaker, under section 6, there is no authority for the constable to bring a patient in after the request for the review, Section 5, has been completed by the nearest relative, and the matter has been reported to a medical officer. Because of this, Mr. Speaker, there are several instances where the medical officer contacts the constable, but the process is delayed because of the absence of the provision and a form to send on with the constable. Now, within this bill, Mr. Speaker, protective custody means an arrangement where a person is being safeguarded by or under the care and protection of law enforcement authorities. References to the words governor in cabinet are now replaced with the word cabinet. Clause 3, amendment of Section 6, emergency detention order. This clause amends Section 6 of the law by repealing subsection 1 and substituting new subsections. The new subsections, Mr. Speaker, provides or orders for protective custody. Mr. Speaker, if a medical officer is of the opinion that a person is or may be suffering from a mental impairment or serious mental illness, the medical officer may make an order for protective custody in the prescribed form, directing the constable to take the person into protective custody and with all reasonable dispatch bring the person before a medical doctor employed by the government to be examined. The form proposed, Mr. Speaker, in the Mental Health Amendment Regulations 2022 will facilitate this very same process. Mr. Speaker, this clause also clarifies the procedure relating to emergency detention orders. Clause 4, repeal and substitution of Section 7, apprehension of a person suspected to be a danger. Mr. Speaker, this clause introduces a new section, which specifies that a constable shall take a person into protective custody where a person appears to be an immediate danger to himself or herself or other persons, or is threatening, attempting, or preparing to inflict self-harm. In this instance, Mr. Speaker, the person apprehended must be brought before a government medical doctor to be examined, and the making of the emergency detention order is by the medical officer and not the medical doctor. Clause 5, amendment of Section 9, treatment order. Mr. Speaker, this clause removes a minor conflict in the legislation, as Section 12 of the Act already includes a provision to address the violation of an assisted outpatient treatment order. Clause 6, amendment of Section 12, assisted outpatient treatment order. Mr. Speaker, this clause introduced new subsections and aligned the procedures relating to orders for protective custody, as well as the making of emergency detention orders for protective custody, where following a period of hospitalization, a patient is unlikely to participate in treatment voluntary or does not comply with recommended treatments. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take some time to provide some information on the assisted outpatient treatment order on that form. Since it was first introduced in 2013, in 2014, 11 assisted outpatient treatment orders were issued. For 2020 and 2021, 29 and 25 were issued respectively. The introduction, Mr. Speaker, of the AOTO is an important advancement in the treatment of people with serious mental illness. These individuals are ordered into treatment without being in a hospital. This, Mr. Speaker, is less restrictive, less expensive, and more humane form of commitment than inpatient commitment. Patients are seen in the community by the community psychiatrist nurse, and this helps to reduce homelessness, suicides, attempts, and substance abuse. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, hospitalizations is reduced and the public is kept safer by reducing physical harms to others according to research. Clause 7. Repeal and substitution of Section 16 restrictions on access to post and electronics networks. Mr. Speaker, this clause amends Section 16 of the law to include current provisions on postal restrictions and to take into consideration technological advancement and the use of electronic networks for patients' access. Mr. Speaker, with the additional provisions, if in the opinion of reasonable medical officer, access to any electronic network directly or indirectly by a patient may have an adverse effect on the patient, access to electronic network may be denied. However, Mr. Speaker, the patient who has been denied access or the patient's nearest relative may within 7 days after being informed of the decision appeal to the Mental Health Commission. Mr. Speaker, these are the proposed amendments to the Mental Health Amendment Bill 2022. Once this bill, Mr. Speaker, has been passed by this Honourable House, the Mental Health Amendment Regulations 2022 will be submitted to Cabinet for their consideration and approval. Mr. Speaker, these amendments are necessary to meet the needs of the patients, healthcare practitioners, and the stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, since the introduction of the updated law in 2014, the establishment of the Mental Health Commission, the various NGOs providing mental health support and promotion, there has been a reduction in the stigma and discrimination associated with mental health. It is said that mental health is one of the most neglected areas of public health. Mr. Speaker, I beg you to pay close attention to these facts. Close to 1 billion people are living with a mental health disorder. 3 million people die every year with harmful use of alcohol, and 1 person dies every 40 seconds by suicide. Let that sink in. The COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Speaker, is having a further impact on people's mental health as well. Here in the Cayman Islands, we are fortunate as most persons have access to quality mental health services, albeit they have to pay for those services. Mr. Speaker, in a recently released World Health Organization World Health Mental Health Report, Transforming Mental Health for All, the report noted the following for mental health reform and restructuring services requiring change. We have to promote mental health for all, protect those at risk, and provide mental health care in the community. We must, Mr. Speaker, continue to invest in mental health, support friends and families who are struggling, introduce employee wellness programs, and make mental health care a reality for everyone. Mr. Speaker, I leave my colleagues and the listening public here today with this quote from the report. Mental health is an integral part of our general health and well-being and a basic human right. Having good mental health means we are better able to connect, function, cope, and thrive. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to the support of my fellow colleagues and members of this honourable House in support of this bill. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary and the member for West Bay Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just rise briefly to thank the Honourable Minister for bringing this much-needed piece of legislative change to this Honourable House. As you know, Mr. Speaker, and my colleagues from the District of West Bay, we do have a high volume of individuals in our district who suffer with mental illnesses, and it's oftentimes their family members that suffer to provide the assistance that they require. And I think that this legislative change will assist many of the individuals that I have certainly been in contact with since being elected, as many of these individuals suffer when it comes to trying to get their family members to the facilities that they require medical care, because these protective orders, I think for far too long, have not had the legislative framework in place to provide the power or authorities to the police officers. So I thank the Honourable Member for ensuring that this came down to this Honourable House on such a timely day as today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Last call. Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I shall ask the Honourable Minister for her right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleagues. Again, as I stated in the opening, I'm most humbled, and it couldn't come at a better time, today being the observance of World Mental Health Day. But I'd like to express gratitude to all the persons who have contributed to putting the amendment together. I must also like to thank the members of the legislative drafting team, the Mental Health Commission, their members, and my ministerial staff for their support. Thank you, sir.
Question is that a bill entitled the Mental Health Amendment Bill 2022 be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The Mental Health Amendment Bill 2022 has been given a second reading.
Mental Health Commission Amendment Bill 2022.
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to move the second reading of the bill titled Mental Health Commission Amendment Bill 2022.
The bill is duly moved. Is the Honourable Minister speaking there too?
Very briefly, because this coincides with the first bill that I placed before and has been accepted, which again I thank this Honourable House. Mr. Speaker, in 2013, the Mental Health Act made provisions for the creation of the Mental Health Commission. The Mental Health Commission focuses on key issues and makes recommendations to government, service providers, and other stakeholders on how best to improve the systems that are directly related to mental health care. Mr. Speaker, the membership of the Commission consists of a broad range of individuals who bring their expertise and knowledge to the Commission. They include expertise as attorneys at law, a therapist, psychiatrist, medical doctor, community psychiatrist, nurse, and 3 laypersons. Mr. Speaker, the Mental Health Commission Amendment Bill 2022 specifies amendments required to the Mental Health Commission Act 2013 as a consequence of the enactment of the Mental Health Amendment Act 2022. Mr. Speaker, I will now speak a little bit in more detail to the specific proposals contained in the Mental Health Commission Amendment Bill 2022. Clause 1, short title and commencement. This clause, Mr. Speaker, provides for the short title and commencement of the legislation. The Mental Health Commission Amendment Act 2022 will come into force immediately after the Mental Health Amendment Act 2022 comes into force. Clause 2, amendments of Section 7 of the Mental Health Commission Act 2013, functions of commission, quasi-judicial. This clause, Mr. Speaker, clarifies that as a consequence of the enactment of the Mental Health Amendment Act 2022, the Mental Health Commission shall also hear and determine appeals against restrictions imposed in respect of access to postal packets and electronic networks for patients, networks by patients. Mr. Speaker, these amendments are necessary to ensure that the provisions of the bill aligns with the provisions under the Mental Health Amendment Act 2022. As stated before, these are consequential amendments, and the role and function of the Commission are outlined in an annual report presented to the Parliament. Mr. Speaker, the training provided by the Commission is designed to increase mental health literacy, reduce stigma of mental illness, and provide the public with the skills and knowledge to better manage potential or developing mental health problems with our families, friends, and colleagues alike. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I would like to express, again, my gratitude to all those persons who have contributed to putting this amendment together. And I look forward to the support of all of my colleagues in this honourable House in supporting this bill. Thank you.
Question is that a bill shortly entitled I guess I was moving too quickly. But I must admit I was attending to a call for a person who wants to apply for a nursing post. So be aware I will be speaking to you about it. Sorry about that. Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I'll call on the mover if she wishes to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, let me take this opportunity to express sincere gratitude to the Legislative Drafting Department, the Mental Health Commission members, and my ministerial staff. And I know with this passage today that all of the persons and all of the government agencies that were impaired in exercising their duties now have this legal and legislative framework that allows them to execute their duties in accordance to law. Thank you.
Question is the bill shortly entitled the Mental Health Commission Amendment Bill 2020. Mental Health Commission Amendment Bill 2022 be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The Mental Health Commission Amendment Bill 2022 has been given a second reading and passed.
Financial Assistance Bill 2022.
The Honorable the Minister of Commerce and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the second reading of a bill entitled the Financial Assistance Bill 2022.
The bill has been duly moved. Is the Honorable Minister speaking thereto?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, most definitely. Mr. Speaker, I rise to present the bill on behalf of the government to present a bill for an act to repeal the Poor Persons Relief Act 1997 revision, to provide for the continuance of the Needs Assessment Unit as the Department of Financial Assistance, to introduce a new procedure in respect of applications for and the issuance of financial assistance, and to provide for a financial assistance appeals tribunal and for incidental and connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, as I commence in earnest, I will do so with a quote that I keep on my phone that I referred to on the 2021 campaign trail and that I have repeated since at various functions for social development, as well as for financial services and commerce, because it's relevant to those stakeholders too. Former US President Franklin D. Roosevelt once said, "The test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little." I am hard-pressed, Mr. Speaker, to find another quote that fully captures the mindset we should have as a government at this point. Globally, Mr. Speaker, there is an economic downturn which is affecting people of all socioeconomic statuses. However, it is disproportionately affecting vulnerable groups, such as older persons, persons with disabilities, and families who are accessing financial assistance services. The COVID-19 pandemic, which began in the first quarter of 2020, has had drastic implications for the Cayman Islands workforce. It reduced job opportunities for those who are already unemployed or those who are underemployed. Additionally, the world has experienced a financial decline in 2022 with the ongoing war between Russia and the Ukraine, the decline of financial markets, which began earlier this year, and the rise of inflation. It is plain, Mr. Speaker, to anyone who pays attention to the subject of social development that the Cayman Islands social safety net was insubstantial prior to the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. An office that was certainly paying attention pre-pandemic was the Office of the Auditor General. In May 2015, Mr. Speaker, 2015, the Office of the Auditor General published a report entitled Government Programs Supporting Those in Need. Mr. Speaker, when one reads that report, it should send a shiver through you concerning the state of our social safety net. And Mr. Speaker, if that was the case in 2015, in light of all of the global events I just mentioned, the insubstantial social safety net would be under now even more enormous pressure, pushed to a precariously feeble point. However, Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General's report of 2015 was not all doom and gloom. It was also helpful as it outlined 12 recommendations to strengthen our social safety net. Against that backdrop, Mr. Speaker, this new government understood that a new, modern approach needed to be taken to bolster and reimagine the area of social development. An approach that combined the advantages of other subject areas to produce better social outcomes, which is how, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Investment, Innovation, and Social Development came into being, and why the ministry and I composed as part of our vision and mission statement, as set out on page 177 of the 2022-2023 budget statements, the following: to assist and uplift the less fortunate of our society, we will reimagine social development by creating meaningful, measurable, efficient, and effective reforms to government's policies and programs of social assistance for Cayman's least fortunate, and ensuring that the fruits of innovation and investment raise and improve the lives of all members of our society. To get started, Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General's report at recommendation 7 recommended the following, and I quote: the then government should follow through on the 2013-2014 strategic policy statement to amend the Poor Persons Relief Law and to develop accompanying regulations so as to provide sound legislative authority for poor relief programs, including the basis for the development of criteria needed to effectively manage the programs. However, the approach taken here, Mr. Speaker, goes further. It seeks to repeal the Poor Persons Relief Act, 1997, a two-page act in substance that was originally enacted in 1964 and has only had a slight amendment 25 years ago. In this time, in this economic climate, Mr. Speaker, it is not time to bite around the edges and lightly amend a principal act that's hopelessly out of date and create regulations controlled solely by the executive. No, Mr. Speaker, it's time to make a statement in this country, in its parliament, that an act shortly entitled the Poor Persons Relief Act is unacceptable in this day and age, and an overhaul is required, not only to assist the vulnerable, but bring about greater accountability to our social safety net. As such, Mr. Speaker, the bill was developed as an initial foundational piece to reimagine and modernize the subject area of social development in this country. Mr. Speaker, in the Cayman Islands, at the center of this discussion are eligible Caymanians who are accessing financial assistance. Upon embarking on this research, we can see that approximately 2/3 of these are older persons and persons with disabilities that are permanent. Just over 30% are families with dependents, and a small portion, roughly 3%, are of working age with no dependents. So we have our range, and we have our general breakdown of the client population and embarking on an enhanced way to assist. Mr. Speaker, I'll now turn to touch on the three primary aspects of financial assistance will be addressed by this bill. First, this bill will establish the Department of Financial Assistance, currently referred to as the Needs Assessment Unit, in legislation and will outline its functions and its authority. Second, it establishes the categories of people who are eligible for financial services, for financial assistance, and the conditions which could be placed on recipients of financial assistance. And lastly, it will provide for a financial assistance appeals tribunal. Mr. Speaker, the bill is arranged in 6 parts. Part 1 provides the preliminary provisions. This part contains clauses 1 and 2. Clause 1 contains the short title and commencement provisions. Clause 2 provides definitions for the words used throughout the legislation. These definitions have correlated with existing legislation where applicable, such as the definition of person with a disability and the definition of older person. Part 2 provides for the Department of Financial Assistance as well as the director and other officers of the Department of Financial Assistance. This part contains clauses 3 to 9. Clause 3 provides that the Department of Government known as the Needs Assessment Unit under this legislation, as I said before, will now be known as the Department of Financial Assistance, should this bill pass. Clause 4 provides for the functions of the department, including the managing and administrating of funds appropriated by Parliament for the purpose of financial assistance. Clause 5 provides for the powers of the officers of the department, the exercise and performance of the department's functions. Clause 6 provides for the continuance of public offices of the director and other officers of the department. Clause 7 provides for the duties and responsibilities of the director, including the administration and implementation of this legislation and management and supervision of the department. Clause 8 provides that the minister responsible, after consultation with cabinet, may give written policy directions to the director, which the director must follow in performance of the director's functions. And Clause 9 empowers the director to request information of any entity or financial institution which may reasonably be required in exercise of the director's duties and responsibilities under the legislation. Part 3 provides, among other things, the application process for financial assistance, as well as the conditions attached to the receipt of financial assistance. This part includes clauses 10 through 8. Clause 10 provides for persons who may apply for financial services, namely Caymanians, certain spouses or civil partners of Caymanians, and the guardians of Caymanian dependents. Clause 11 provides for the evaluation and determination of an application for financial assistance by the director. Clause 12 provides that where the director is satisfied that an applicant fulfills the prescribed criteria for eligibility for financial assistance, the director shall grant the application. Clause 13 provides the director shall refuse an application for financial assistance where the director is not satisfied that the applicant fulfills the criteria for eligibility for financial assistance. Clause 14, importantly, Mr. Speaker, provides for conditions which are attached to the receipt of financial assistance, such as registering with the Department of Work, attending training or employment, or taking up volunteer opportunities for those who are able to work. Other conditions may include attending parenting programs or engaging in mental health services or assessments. Mr. Speaker, I just want to pause there on Clause 14 to emphasize its importance. It means for the first time in this country, this legislation for those who are receiving the grant of financial services, financial assistance, if they are able, in return for that grant, they must do something of value to the community. And this has every possibility to be successful We've already had calls from private sector firms, reputable large firms, nonprofit organizations who have said once, and hopefully this passes, we are happy to lend support to such programs. Clause 15 provides for the circumstances in which the director may suspend payments of financial assistance. Clause 16 provides for the circumstances in which the director shall revoke a decision to issue financial assistance, and also provides for the circumstances in which the director may exercise discretion in deciding whether a decision to issue financial assistance should be revoked. Clause 17 provides that the director may review a decision to issue financial assistance and vary financial assistance where new facts are brought to the director's attention. And Clause 18 provides that the director may reconsider a decision in respect of an applicant or a recipient where the applicant or recipient who is aggrieved by the decision applies for reconsideration. Part 4 provides for the establishment and appointment of the Financial Assistance Appeals Tribunal, whose responsibility is to hear and determine requests for reviews of the decision of the director in relation to financial assistance. This part contains clauses 19 to 25. Clause 19 provides for the appointment and constitution of the Appeals Tribunal. Clause 20 provides for the appointment of a secretary to the tribunal. Clause 21 provides for the terms and appointment of the members of the tribunal and provides that a member of the tribunal shall hold office for a period not exceeding 3 years. Clause 22 provides for the circumstances in which the cabinet may terminate the appointment of a member of the Appeals Tribunal. And Clause 23 provides that where a member of the Appeals Tribunal has a possible, perceived, actual, or potential personal or pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, in a matter which is to be determined by the Appeals Tribunal, the member shall disclose that member's interest and shall not take part in consideration or discussion of the matter or vote on a question with respect to such matter. Clause 24 provides that the functions of the Appeals Tribunal are to hear and to determine appeals against the decisions of the director, including decisions in respect of refusal of an application for financial assistance, or the suspension, revocation, or variation of financial assistance. Finally, Clause 25 provides for the powers which the Appeals Tribunal may exercise on hearing an appeal against a decision of the director. And the Appeals Tribunal is empowered to, among other things, confirm, vary, amend, or reverse, or set aside the decision of the director, or to make a decision which the Appeals Tribunal thinks ought to have been made in the first place. Part 5 provides for offenses and penalties. This part contains clauses 26 to 28. Part 6 provides for the regulation making provisions, the repeal of the Poor Persons Relief Act, and the savings and transitional provisions. This part contains clauses 29 to 36. And that, Mr. Speaker, was a mountain of work that took a lot of time and consideration. Mr. Speaker, as I begin to wind up, I will just briefly say in closing, Mr. Speaker, that in my humble opinion, this House is on the verge of passing landmark legislation, creating a modern and fit-for-purpose legislation to govern the government's financial assistance given to Caymanians while creating accountability as well as legal recourse. If this bill passes today, it will largely address 5 out of the 12 recommendations set forth in the Auditor General's report of 2015. But, Mr. Speaker, even if this bill passes, we will not rest on our laurels. We are only getting started. The Needs Assessment Unit will be rebranded and revamped with a new facility in Cayman Brac. Expanded and enhanced facility right here in Grand Cayman, with additional client services, with a call center, a respectable and comfortable reception area, hiring additional financial assistance officers. Mr. Speaker, we would then turn to finalize accompanying regulations to deal with the Appeals Tribunal in-depth procedures and the matters of application procedures. Mr. Speaker, we will build on innovative steps that we have already taken to date, including a revamped website, establishing an online application so clients, which was already done, establish an online application that allows clients to apply remotely via mobile devices or laptops. We've created partnerships with Digicel and Flow to permit mobile users with an active SIM card to access the Needs Assessment Unit's website and also to utilize its online application portal at zero cost without paying for the data transfer. We also created a continuation certificate for the benefit of older persons and those who are permanently disabled, who have already qualified for government financial assistance. There is no need for them to go through the long process all over again. That is already in place as I speak, Mr. Speaker. And we have begun to set our sights to design a new Needs Assessment Unit, which will then be the Department of Financial Assistance database, to make staff life easier in processing and simpler for the client, and also compile and analyze information in a more effective way to produce detailed statistical analysis, which will enable government to make decisions driven by data and not at a whim of an educated guess. Although in recent times, Mr. Speaker, there would have been much in the public domain pertaining to NEU and the promotion of this bill, and in the press earlier this year regarding the relocation of the Sunrise Adult Training Center to a larger, more modern premises centrally located in Elizabethan Square now. But I want the remaining Social Development Department, the Department of Children and Family Services, to know that they too weigh heavily on my mind. DCFS, as they are called, will be instrumental to the success of reimagining social development. Their services and process will also need to be revamped to assist with social programming to coincide with financial assistance for eligible people in need, including those aged 18 to 64 who don't have kids, so that these individuals get the programming they need and have a sea change to transition them to a more productive life. And also to reimagine in social development our programs for older persons. Mr. Speaker, we will also need to work heavily across ministries with the Minister for Labor and his staff at the Department of Work, with the Minister for Health to reform the indigent cynical healthcare system to provide a one-stop shop service for our clients, with the Minister for Housing, who outlined, as we heard earlier, in painstaking detail, his update on affordable housing. And we will partner together to ensure that a portion of those affordable housing schemes includes social housing, so that those in need of shelter do not, as they do now, solely have to rely on private landlords. Mr. Speaker, this won't be easy. There will inevitably be stumbles, wobbles, points that work well, others that have to be revisited and adjusted. But it's high time, Mr. Speaker, to get started, to uplift our people, to live decently, and where possible, transition them to a more productive station in life. There will be bumps and bruises along the way, but I am willing to try. My colleagues here in this hollow chamber, they are willing to try. As The US actor Denzel Washington famously said, "Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship." Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. And he advised that if you fall down 7 times, get up 8. With that, Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill to this honorable Parliament for its second reading. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I don't need a lectern. I didn't prepare a speech for this. I didn't really plan on speaking on this bill because I think the minister did an excellent job in presenting this bill here. But I am inspired, Mr. Speaker, and move to stand up to record the thanks to the minister on behalf of the rest of my colleagues, because he actually took a very modest approach in his presentation. Mr. Speaker, this is the bill that this legislation is replacing. I just want to hold it up here so everyone can see where the law itself is actually written on 2 pages. Even though the minister said it was revised in 1997, that revision was actually more for typos. This law has remained unchanged since 1964, when it was first enacted, more than 58 years ago, before I was even born, and I'm not even 50 yet, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, as I look at this bill from 1964 with assisting our people on roughly 1 1/4 page, and then I look at what the minister has brought here today in terms of the work that his team has done, and recognizing, as he said in his debate, that this is something that the Auditor General raised from 2013 that needs to be addressed, and recognizing that the report was from 2013, which means the work was probably done from 2012, and that we're here 10 years later after the Auditor General report dealing with it, says something. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, the very first time the current minister ended up on my radar was actually during a Public Accounts Committee meeting, when at that time he was the Deputy Chief Officer in the ministry, and we were actually going through the Auditor General's report. And one of the things that had bothered us in that report was actually the name Poor Relief. And at that time, being a dedicated public servant that he is, and not dealing with policy, he himself also stated that it was something he also had an issue with, because it takes from the dignity of our people. And to see the minister move from Deputy Chief Officer to a minister in this government and carrying out on something that was personal, near and dear to him from before he became a politician, inspired me to stand here today. I can honestly say a promise was made and a promise was kept, and I thank him for that. Mr. Speaker, the minister referred to this as being a landmark piece of legislation. For this government it is. The Premier has stressed many times, Mr. Speaker, about closing the dignity gap for our people. One of the things that this government is working on, as we are also reimagining the budget process from moving from an output budget to an outcome budget, and start looking at Human Development Index. Our ultimate goal, Mr. Speaker, will be the World Happiness Index, one of the things that we're looking at. And that index, Mr. Speaker, look at six measures that they actually measure. And those 6 issues are not weighted equally. They're actually different weightings for the 6. And the first one, the most important one of those 6 in the World Happiness Index, is social support. having someone to count on. That was the first. The second one was basically access to opportunities. That is where we look at the dignity gap. How can we get people to feel good about themselves? The third one is generosity, being able to give back. The fourth one was basically trust in government. The fifth one was real GDP per capita. And the sixth one was life expectancy. But it is the first one, Mr. Speaker, having someone to count on, that social support. And while the government recognizes that unless we find oil somewhere underneath here, our ability to help our people will always be limited as we will not have the resources. But what we are committed to doing is to make sure that when we do help our people, it is that they can actually have or maintain their dignity. Mr. Speaker, this is why, as the Minister highlighted, this also includes our ability to help assist people in terms of health care, our ability to assist people in, in housing and everything else. I mean, one of the very first things, Mr. Speaker, when you look at broad outcome number 1, which deals with education in our strategic policy statement, one of the very first things that we have in the strategic policy statement was taking care of our kids' free school lunches. Because, Mr. Speaker, those are the simple little things. And the pandemic brought it out when we realized the amount of our children that were dependent on getting a meal when they were going to school. And when the school was out, those kids were going hungry. And our people, Mr. Speaker, are proud people, and I'm happy to see the minister actually change the name from that disgusting of poor relief, because it does not reflect our Caymanian values of caring and sharing. This is not who we are. And we recognize, Mr. Speaker, that our people, you could be doing very well today, but you can stumble along the way, you can fall along the way. 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, when you look at the life expectancy of a woman, Mr. Speaker, 85 years. There are so many different things that can happen along the way. We'll have the bumps, we'll have the struggles, we'll have the false start. But it's important for us that we have that safety net where we can help our people and, more importantly, allow us to help them with their dignity. So, Mr. Speaker, I am proud that this government has decided to do something that has been there from 1964, unchanged. The world has changed a lot since. And to have done it in this way, and with the care, the compassion, and the competence that this minister brought to this process, I am proud to be sitting in cabinet with him. And he said earlier that while he cannot find a better quote to probably open up with, I will close with one that JFK said on his inauguration back in 1961. If a free society cannot help the many that are poor, it cannot save the few that are rich. Mr. Speaker, it's important for us as government and as Caymanians that we put the necessary structure and infrastructure in place to assist our people. Mr. Speaker, this is the business that we are in, and this is what it comes down to. So I want to commend the minister. It's a lot of work to be done. It is not the end all, it is not the be all, but we have to start somewhere. And with that, Mr. Speaker, all I can say is, Minister, let us begin. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Parliamentary Secretary and the member from Savannah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the Parliamentary Secretary for Social Development, I rise to voice my support for the Financial Assistance Bill 2022, just brought by the Honourable Minister for Social Development. Mr. Speaker, with these changes today, this bill will bring comfort to all who have had their share of issues when applying for financial assistance. The Honourable Minister, through his vision and foresight, saw fit to do what is right for our people. And today it fills my heart with pride, and I'm extremely proud of him, his staff, and his staff who worked tirelessly to see this through to this point. I'm also proud of the minister who inspires me every day to work harder for our people. Mr. Speaker, as the minister indicated, this bill will establish the Department of Financial Assistance and Legislation. At present, the Needs Assessment Unit does not have any meaningful governing legislation. This state of affairs is wholly unacceptable for a department with responsibility for administering roughly $14 million per year of financial assistance to our people. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, it is high time in 2022 for good governance that legislation finally outlines the functions of the department and what it can do in the exercise of its functions, which is what the bill provides. Mr. Speaker, it is most reassuring to see that the bill outlines that to apply for financial assistance, applicants must be Caymanian, a spouse or civil partner of a Caymanian, or a guardian of a dependent who is Caymanian to a form who is eligible for the first time in law. Mr. Speaker, as the minister indicated, the bill identifies conditions which could be placed on someone who is in receipt of financial assistance. This is primarily with the intention of enabling people who are able to work to access employment and training opportunities. This was echoed within our focus groups, who emphasized the need to consider the holistic individual and households, because we need to return as many who are able back to work. Mr. Speaker, it is reassuring to see that the bill establishes for the first time ever a Financial Assistance Appeals Tribunal. If someone is aggrieved by a decision of the department, they can first apply for reconsideration of a decision from the director, who must provide a decision within 21 working days. In the case that someone remains aggrieved following a reconsideration, the applicant may file for an appeal with the Appeals Tribunal. The Appeals Tribunal will consist of a chairperson who is an attorney at law for at least 5 years, a deputy chairperson who has at least 5 years' experience in health and human services, a person with at least 3 years' experience in finance, and 2 other persons. This is to provide a balanced tribunal that can determine and weigh accountability, but with a human touch of compassion. Mr. Speaker, this bill is long overdue. In my submission, it could only have been brought forward by a government that is truly people-driven, but building an appropriate accountability, competent to get further in this area than ever before in our history, and with transparency in the process. Mr. Speaker, today I support this bill wholeheartedly, and I am proud to be a part of this landmark registration. I thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The member from West Bay Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak briefly on the Financial Assistance Bill 2022 that has been laid on the floor by my colleague, the member for West Bay South. The Minister for Social Development and his team have taken on this much needed and long overdue task to introduce this bill, and I know the Deputy Premier just elaborated on that a bit, so I won't go on any further in that regard. But Mr. Speaker, the rebranding of this legislative framework displays to the public the approach that the minister and this administration have taken. We are moving away from providing relief for a poor man or woman to offering financial assistance by taking a holistic approach to each individual's needs. Many of us know that most of the vulnerable clients of the Needs Assessment Unit require a holistic approach to determining and removing the setbacks that these individuals face, which often prevent them from being able to secure or maintain steady employment. Removing these setbacks, some which could look as simple as establishing childcare, or as extreme as addressing untreated post-traumatic stress syndrome. All of these type of setbacks prevent our Caymanians from becoming self-sufficient. And what this bill does, Mr. Speaker, is it ensures that we do our part to level up our people. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the much-needed name change, this bill also provides the introduction of conditions to individuals who are receiving government's financial assistance. In particular, for households with adult members who are able to work. This is what many of our taxpayers have been crying for: more accountability and mechanisms to ensure that the support is not abused. I'm also pleased that the new mechanisms are put in place for those elderly clients and individuals with medical conditions to ease the burden from them, especially those with lifelong illnesses and disabilities. And this is by removing the frequent assessments, which can be burdensome. Mr. Speaker, these changes, in my view, are all positive for our people and will provide better value for money to the government purse, as well as providing accountability to the recipients. With that being said, I certainly will be supporting this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The member for Bordentown East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to say a few words. Wasn't going to speak, but after I heard a presentation from the minister, I just wanted to add my public and vocal support. Thank you so much, Minister, for being so aggressive in bringing this forward with all intentions of improving the outcome and quality of experience for Caymanians in need. Mr. Speaker, this is near and dear to me, and I'm glad to be a part of this government that is making the greatest leaps and bounds in over 50 years. Our people are not poor, and I'm glad he's changing that name and didn't need to be branded with the latter name. Our people are rich in spirit and would rather a better opportunity to put food on their own tables, Mr. Speaker. This is one of the reasons I came over to support this government. Programs and ideas such as this and ensuring Caymanians feel the care that their government has for them and not only talk in hot air. The minister, or West Bay South MP, shows great passion, Mr. Speaker, especially when he brings these bills to caucus. Very passionate about trying to ensure that we get a better outcome. He has worked very hard, Mr. Speaker, to bring this to this point. I can tell you, and I can almost assure you, Mr. Speaker, that other ministers had similar ambitions. But knowing what people know and the system as to how long it takes to bring things forward. They probably thought, well, I'm not going to get that done in a term. This minister brought it forward in 18 months or less. And I think he ought to be applauded. This is a gigantic, Herculean effort that he has undertook. And I know that he had to pay special attention in the ministry to ensure that everyone worked hard to try to bring this up to speed to get it to this point at this time. And I'm glad that he ensured that, you know, sometimes as a minister you work on things so hard and it comes to the end of your term and you got to leave it and you don't know what else is going to happen with it. But I am thankful that with the experience that he has in working inside government, understands the system, that he pushed and pushed. And now we have a improved financial assistance bill that most can be proud of. And Mr. Speaker, as many have said earlier, and even the minister himself, it won't be perfect, but whatever he finds going along the way, I'm sure he'll bring it back and amend and try to correct it and try to get a bill that any minister coming along can utilize for the next 50 years. And I thank you so much, Minister, for sticking with this. I understand what it means in trying to bring something as Herculean as this forward. And it takes great effort from yourself and from your PS, your parliamentary secretaries, to try to assist in trying to bring this forward. And I thank the government for supporting you and giving you all the support necessary. We had all the confidence from your presentations in caucus that that this was going to be something that we as a government was going to be proud of and the country would be proud of. And I thank you again, and God bless you.
Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable Deputy Governor.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I shall be brief. Mr. Speaker, I certainly want to also join the members of the House here in commending the Minister and the government for bringing this very important piece of legislation. I think the Minister called it landmark legislation, and I certainly agree with that. Mr. Speaker, I too want to thank all of the civil servants who have been involved in the development of this bill. It has taken some time, multiple ministries, but I think everyone worked hard to get us to where we are today. And again, I thank the Minister for bringing us over the finish line. Mr. Speaker, I too also want to just speak briefly about clause 14. And then I also just want to wind up by saying, recognizing the staff at NEU. Mr. Speaker, the Minister spoke about clause 14.2. And in that clause, it talks about conditions that the director may apply when granting someone financial assistance. And it talks about taking up employment. It may require the person to take up employment, an internship or apprenticeship, which may be specified by the director, and where such person is not employed, to complete such hours of work per week with a charitable or voluntary organization as the director may determine. Mr. Speaker, I think those two clauses are very, very important. Mr. Speaker, many, many years ago, I was doing a 5K, and I had the pleasure of walking the entire 5K with a social worker. And we got to talking about what she was seeing in our community. And she made the point to me, which I had never realized, was that we have families, generation of families, that are growing up in social assistance. So if I am born into a family and have never seen my mother work or my father work, why would I want to work? And maybe I want to follow in their footsteps and apply for social assistance. Mr. Speaker, we have to break that, I hope it's not a tradition, but we have to break that way of, that cycle, that way of thinking. And Mr. Speaker, this bill and those clauses that I just mentioned, I think will go a far way to addressing that concern. Because, Mr. Speaker, we can now require those persons who are able-bodied persons to say, listen, if you're going to ask the government for assistance and you are able to work, we're going to ask you to go and volunteer, go and do an apprenticeship program. Mr. Speaker, not only is that putting the person to work, but it's also giving them a skill, maybe learning them a new skill. Maybe it is also building their resume. Because, Mr. Speaker, a lot of persons don't want to be on assistance. They want to work, but they don't have the opportunity. This bill gives them that opportunity, where they can feel proud to say, yes, I am temporarily on government assistance, but you know what? I am working, I am giving back. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to, again, thank the Minister for putting in these clauses in the bill. I think they are absolutely essential, and they can break the cycle of what I have described earlier of generations of persons growing up on social assistance. Mr. Speaker, I want to pay tribute also to the staff at NAU. Mr. Speaker, we get complaints, and we hear that one or two persons were not granted assistance, or one or two persons didn't get their call answered, or a few persons didn't get what they wanted. But we don't hear of the hundreds of people who get tended to with no complaint. Because we have a very capable director, Mr. Mara Holston, and we have some really great staff working at NAU. I think two of them are over there right now, sitting in the chamber. Mr. Speaker, the staff there are dedicated. They work long hours. They work very hard. And I, as head of the civil service, it would be remiss of me if I did not thank them, sincerely thank them for their hard work and assistance in taking up the reins and helping our people who are desperate in need of assistance. Mr. Speaker, the Minister made a very important point also, and he said that he would be looking to increase the staff at NAU, putting in a new department, and also finding them better accommodation. I want to say thank him for that. To get this bill done and operating correctly, it's going to need people. The bill itself is not going to help all our people. It's going to need capable persons, good leadership, great support from the ministry, great directions from the minister, and together we will make a real difference. And as head of the civil service, I want to commit to the minister today to say that I know the civil service will do everything it can to make this bill a success and to bring life-changing, positive life changes to our people. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I'll call on the mover for his right of reply. Just to ask, sir, you intend to be quite lengthy or brief?
It depends on the definition of brief. I don't think I'll be more than, say, 15 minutes. 15 minutes.
Oh, well, what we will do then, we'll give you some sustenance. We will take the evening break at this point for 45 minutes. Thank you.
I'm ready to go. I can.